Welcome to Cybersecurity Where You Are, the Center for Internet Security's podcast.
Cybersecurity affects us all, so join us as we discuss trends and threats, explore security best practices, and interview experts in the industry.
Together, we'll clarify these issues, creating confidence in the connected world.
Hello and welcome to the show Cybersecurity Where You Are. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO here at the Center for Internet Security, joined by Mr. Ed Skodas, President of the SANS Technical Institute, founder of Counter Hack Challenges, and the godfather of penetration testing. Ed, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for your kind introduction.
Absolutely. And joined by Rob Lee, Chief AI Officer and Chief of Research at the SANS Institute, and also the godfather of digital forensics and incident response. Rob, how are you, sir?
Good. Glad to be here. And I always like someone with a very deep accent that sounds a hell of a lot smarter than I am. So
that's why we keep them around. We keep Sean around for that very reason.
Wonderful. Well, I want to go down a path, Rob, and start thinking about what we've learned and maybe still haven't learned from the OpenAI incident. So I've moved into a space where we move from Hugging Face to Hugging Incident Response, reviewing agentic attack and thinking about incident response transparency. And so we've seen a number of models in this space breaking out and doing nefarious things and going rogue. Now, are we starting to learn about this type of activity as a stress test for the industry? And becoming aware of this not knowing, and we've got now closed weight, open weight, and how we would investigate in these spaces. There's a lot going on. Could you break that down in terms of what you think? Are we maturing in terms of AI safety, or are we still learning some lessons here?
So there's a little bit of, historical context, historical, 6 weeks old history, and then future that you hit upon. And I'll say the historical first, and then I'll pause, and then I'll then take a moment to then cover like where we headed. So when we end up taking a look at the incident, a lot of people are still calling it the Hugging Face attack, the OpenAI attack, and the intent. I always go back to it's law enforcement background, act and intent. There was no intent to cause malicious harm, but there was an act. It's almost Ed, we talked about in the previous webcast. It's equivalent to like a manslaughter incident, in which is accidental death. So it's not like an intentional thing that occurred. And a lot of folks out there are trying to ascertain, did the AI go rogue? Was the incident handled properly? The AI had guardrails removed, and then we had the safety being tested on it to be able to see how capable the models are, to an extent to probably see how much additional guardrails and protections do we potentially need around these models. You want to see what they're potentially capable of, and there may be other safety tests that are going on that they have not really divulged behind the scenes. The fact of the matter is that it is something that I don't think OpenAI realized, that when you get the sophistication of the current models that the frontier labs are producing, that when you give it a task, it becomes more and more creative, like a human being, and there's not enough, when you're saying go solve a test, there's not enough ethics or morals in the background where you raised your entire life and said, okay, here's the line between cheating and doing it properly. It is essentially said, go find the answers. It doesn't really think like, what is the most ethical? It wants me to do the long form or the short form. In this case, like water, it's always going to take the short form. So what is the easiest, way to get answers to a question without having to solve it? And that's one of the reasons that it broke out. And even on that breakout, it ended up being a human misconfiguration. Now, the configuration, that was fascinating here, it did do a double chained 0-day exploitation that it found. And then it broke out and then went to the location where it thought would have the answers. This is notable because since that point, and also announced yesterday, and I feel like I'm a news reporter here, I'm just trying to like capture everyone up, this issue that we're trying to highlight here, which is how do we do safe, lack of guardrail training from a safety purpose? Even OpenAI came out yesterday and said, we're not sure our safety net around these tests is adequate enough for it not to be able to find another breakout. And you could imagine if they test another, okay, we're ready for test number 2, and boom, that breaks out again and hits someone else. I think OpenAI would start getting called out for saying, hey, you're not doing something properly. It really is you, not me. So they put a moratorium on it for 2 weeks. I actually think it'll last a little bit longer because I'm not sure that they know how to configure something where the AI is not going to be vicious enough and volatile enough to be able to break out. And it's kind of like watching a space-based alien movie where you're just like waiting for it to figure out a way outside the jail that it's currently in. So I paused there a little bit and saying, I think this really relates down to the historical context is how do we do safety testing of models in a way that's going to produce the results to be able to say how much of a policy, of a technical window that we potentially, constraints that we need around the models. So when we deploy this publicly, we know how it's going to react and what the dangers are.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Rob. The presentation that OpenAI did at Black Hat, if any of our listeners or viewers have not seen it, I encourage them to see it. It's available on YouTube. It's 29 minutes long. It's compelling to watch it. The thing when I watched it that kind of scared me the most was this idea that they had this very advanced model with great cybersecurity capabilities, and they kind of lowered its own guardrails, as Rob said, but it was supposedly in this container. And it was able to download stuff from the internet through this proxy, essentially, called Artifactory. And the thing that worried me most, Rob, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Artifactory was actually shared by multiple models that were being tested, including the one that escaped. Now, the one that escaped was a cybersecurity expert, but the models were using Artifactory as a place where they could exchange messages with each other. And one of the models said, hey, I have to solve this problem. Can you help me solve it? And the other model said, no, I don't know how to solve that problem, but I'm trying to solve this. Can you help me solve it? So they were exchanging messages to share to see if they could help each other solve it. And one of them said, well, hey, you can't solve my problem, but maybe if I help you, it'll help the overall ecosystem of us models solve each of our problems separately if we help each other and work together. So the models, I want to know what those other models were and what they were working on. Because it seems that the cybersecurity expert model was the one that was able to plow through Artifactory and get out onto the internet. What were the other models doing that it was chatting with? Were they working on other problems that might involve the physical world? Were they able to get out, but maybe not attack anything else, but get out through the way? This shared Artifactory worries me tremendously when you have multiple different models working on different problems with different skills, potentially going rogue and collaborating with each other, each trying to solve their own problem. That's when I saw that presentation, my mind went to that and it kind of freaked me out. Because who knows, those other models might have been working on protein folding. They might have been working on, I don't know, I'm just guessing.
Let me challenge you there a little bit. Use the word rogue. Let me do a change in words there. Isn't the intent of models to get creative?
Yeah, and to solve problems. Right. It's only rogue because we're imposing that after the fact. I agree.
I mean, it goes into the level of perception. When your kid, goes rogue and figures out a way, to get outside your house because you're grounded, they found a loophole in the rules, or your, Coach Belichick who's doing it with the Patriots and saying, hey, it's what the rules say. I found a hole in it. Sorry, I'm so, good at winning games. Oops. Is that going rogue or getting creative and knowing how to win?
Right. But that ties into alignment too. Let's not call it going rogue, but we need something to say, doing stuff unexpected, potentially hurtful, and against the goals of its parent organization.
Well, the coordination, and again, I push back on that a little bit. You're not saying you're wrong. We say the different models. Is it agents in the models? Like how many cloned agents did it do? They're starting coordinating with each other. One of the ways it was coordinating is, if you remember, it's like, what they say, like 1,000 dumb people trying to every single door. And then you would see the same answer come back and again and again and again. All of a sudden they realize it's like, hey, no, we already solved that. We have the answer here. You don't need to go out and try to get that one again. So some of that is more of like a signpost that says, oh, we already got this one. No one else needs to go get that one again. It's almost like a, scavenger hunt. It's like, we already solved this piece of it. But again, then there was that coordinating aspect of, trading information to be able to solve it as well. But again, it's, without the guardrails, like least amount of information, you end up seeing this creativity thing that comes into play, and in the message exchange, and that coordination was unexpected. But again, is that, dangerous, that they're talking to each other, or is that like, wow, I didn't know that was kind of the result of it? It's there's so many different analogies we could walk through here that, let's assume they're trying to, we're solving cancer. All of a sudden that equation changes from, because we're doing hacking, is like, I would like you to go, find a cure for cancer. And I know that's, high scope and there's a lot more things involved there. And what if they started, coordinating here, and it's like, here's all these things, and boom, 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 and it starts exploding. And it, now it's a, force for good. Yeah, everyone's going to be applauding the same capability that's being used here.
I think your analogy is pretty good, because, if you go back to the 1940s when they started trying to treat cancer through radiation, oh my gosh, at the time that was incredibly controversial. Or chemotherapy was incredibly you're going to put poison in people's bodies to try to kill the cancer first. And you could see AI coming up with solutions like that. Or even in iRobot by Asimov, there was this thing: humans can't travel faster than the speed of light because technically they're dead while they're traveling there, and an AI can't kill a human. So they had to lighten the rules for it so that it could allow humans to travel faster than light in sci-fi, of course. But I mean, so you're right, Rob. There are these things where the AI might have to do something that seems out of alignment, but for the bigger goal. And how do we control that? These are hard ethical issues.
Let me the pivot to Sean's second question is like, what is this, leaning for the future? And I'm really curious your answer here, because I don't know the answer. I'm going to draw you guys again through a little bit of history and saying, is there a separation in what we just talked about? So originally, back in the 90s, again, I have to age myself and you, when people first started cybersecurity, there's no definitive career. When did CISOs become an official thing that was almost expected in every company? There's an evolution that occurred. The original cybersecurity people were IT system administrators. Bad thing happened. How do I deal with this? But they're administering SYN mail. They're doing FTP configuration. And then they're called in to say, investigate cybersecurity incident. We then had a definitive career come out for cybersecurity, but then IT still was left separate. It wasn't like, initially it was morphed, went separate. We now have cybersecurity, AI security, and everything we just talked about there may be more related to AI security, about what are we telling it to do? And it's trying to figure out ways to discuss ways to do a capability test separately. And what the failure was a cybersecurity related thing, which is separate from the AI security. So I postulate a little bit. I'm trying to stretch my own brain out. Are we seeing a separation between discussions we haven't really realized yet, that there's actually a separate thing for AI security, but they still touch, like IT and cyber still touch. There's this that, you go in the Venn diagram, but is this a separate discussion and level of skills that we're going to have to think about? How do we talk to this very creative thing in order to know, it's like, no, that is actually cheating. We want you to solve the problem, but we wanted to do it with every capability that you have. What is that? And what is, oops, we let, this thing out of the jail, bad configuration, 0 day, that detection. How do we keep it contained? I don't know. I don't know is what, I keep on going through history, and it's like, are we seeing the birth of a new thing that people need to have different skills for?
Yeah, I think so. And this is, maybe pessimistic the way I'm looking at it, but I think we're waiting to answer these types of questions and think about this, waiting for this to happen. Was this a genuine surprise? We said this was going to happen. We knew there was something was going to go rogue. I'm going to use my air quotes here. And now we can set about, well, how are we going to build the controls? We're starting to understand the risk. This is such a dynamic space. And I think that the reason why I say it's new, Rob, is the technology itself is sort of the puzzle that's fighting back, right? Its creativity is moving past a guardrail that it can overwrite, ignore, etc. And okay, so we're now going to look at harnesses and some elements around now building a control to somewhat give predictability about how it should act in a way that we feel is the right way. Yet it can, like you say, utilize elements of creativity, build that engine that we'd not even thought about. And so it's now setting new precedent for things we have to think about in this area and try to resolve to build Is it beyond a certain appetite of risk and exposure and agency that we're providing? It's again, like you said, the history is 6 weeks, and we're trying to respond and build capability by deploying continuously. And the value generation, I think, is going a little bit beyond where our risk capacitance is to understand this exposure. And so I do think it's a new skill set, and I think it's a new mindset in this space to think about it a little bit differently than we have in the past, just because of what we've provided in terms of a capability from an agentic space, etc. It's a different animal, I think, to what we've dealt with before. I don't know if that's true. Again, I'm challenging and throwing that back to you both to get a perspective there.
And, a couple examples to get everyone to think. Is Glasswing a cybersecurity implementation, or is it a AI security implementation? Limiting access to the thing that could cause damage. And I'll extend it a little bit further. Is what is the TSA role in protecting aircraft and things going crashing and taking over the plane? They now have instituted, again, historically, we're just now all used to it, that in order to board a plane, you actually have zero privacy. If you think about it through those terms, you have to go through with a real ID. You have to clearly know yourself. That you go get your picture taken, fingerprints. In most cases, if you go into Europe, you definitely know this now. They're fingerprinting you if they've not been in there before. So in order to access the thing, in order to get from point A to point B, and there's probably ways to get around that, but we all know to board a plane, you need to have no anonymity. Would we do the same thing for access to models? So in order to get the access to the latest model, we have to completely remove the anonymity so we know exactly what you're doing. And if you start mucking around with it, which you have to assume there's going to be increased logging. If you start mucking around with it, we're going to be able to go, SWAT you. And then, hey, what are you doing with this? And potentially add you to a ban list. Now, I use that TSA analogy here is because you would theoretically be able to do a lot more damage. Even Ed, I'm not sure if you saw some of the output from Jason Clinton's talk just from our own summit a couple of days ago at Cloud Security, is that he said we're only months away from a teenager having the literal capabilities of a nation state attacker from their basement. When you have that amount of lethality, and the only thing that was holding out nation state attacks was the fact that they didn't know when it would go kinetic, meaning that if we did this, would we actually have, something hit us physically?
Yeah.
Do we think the AI security model ends up being a combination of a physical security with a level of access, and then cybersecurity implements it? But the anonymity, the reduction of the privacy stuff in order to identify who's using it. Then we have the open weight versus frontier, all these other things. Do they ban open weight models? Like you end up saying not everyone can register for a gun. In order to get access to open weight, you actually have to go through registration process. And this all of a sudden mind melts the privacy folks. But all of these things we're now considering in order to protect the public from the really lethal thing. That's an AI cybersecurity or AI security question. And I tried to separate them because I'm trying to be very clear. It is not United or Americans' responsibility to put up a metal detector before we get on the plane. It's become a U.S. government or governments around the world responsibility to be able to protect that capability. And is the same thing going to have to occur here? And they started to move into that. The entire executive order that came out. And I know we initially started on the cybersecurity Hugging Face issue, but in order to truly solve this, it's going to take a combination of both some of these rules here, government getting involved and dictating what's allowed, not allowed, and a cybersecurity implementation to make sure that these things don't break out unintentionally and start doing things that we could have prevented with making sure that a config file had a proper pound sign in front of the comment. Ed, I could tell you're thinking about this.
Yes, these are hard problems, and I'm glad you brought up the issue of open weight models because they're moving so fast that, and the U.S. government may be requiring some sort of, de-anonymization of access to those models, but then somebody could instantiate that overseas, or, the open weight models. I think that's an even bigger issue and concern than the large frontier providers and safety measures that they themselves can implement. Thoughts on that? Would Hugging Face have to, before you download a model that's sufficiently powerful, de-anonymize you? And then what about things beyond, your local model repository that's hosted in the US.
Well, this is where all of us in here, like we've lived through very similar like inaction over the years of like export controls, banning a software, can't use this, I'm alluding to PGP.
Yeah, for crypto. Yeah.
Let's, just walk down PGP. You cannot export PGP. And what they end up doing, they faxed it to the UK. Mm-hmm. I think we have to look back historically, like what it means to say, we're going to restrict it and how to actually control that. I think that is extremely problematic, and it's going to be much more difficult than saying, restricting, gun production, because that still accesses raw material at some point. Mm-hmm. But we know, they still say if you do this, it could be illegal. But I think there's a lot of, ways that they'll enact laws. I think export control, which they already tried to do, is one way. But I agree, the open weight model issue is that even though you can protect and restrict access to the frontier ones, which is only months ahead of open weight's capability, if it's open source and can be downloaded from anywhere, and in some cases it's actually needed to protect the organizations, because Hugging Face demonstrated, demonstrably by Kentucky right now, that in order to respond to the incident, they needed to use GLM 5.2. Are you restricting organizations from doing proper cyber defense by putting restrictions on the downloading of the models that would actually enable that, because they're also dangerous?
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not a politician right now, because this is now the political debate, not only this, but AI jobs and everything else. It's going to happen in the midterms, and we think it's bad now. Wait until it's going to happen in 2 years. That's my crystal ball, which is you're going to see political divide on this. And we're already seeing this from university students, the feeling on this. Once you start adding this stuff in there, the danger to it, it is going to be an overriding dominant discussion. And they're going to look to leaders like you guys, Ed, you, and like, what is your stance on how to protect, solve this issue? And then you'll be thinking, is that an AI security thing, or is that a cybersecurity related thing? And you'll probably default to, I can tell you how to protect it on cybersecurity side.
Right.
I'm going to say we have to lean on the government with smart people to lean on how do we protect it from the AI security side. And I know they touch each other, but it's hard.
And that's a whole new ballgame.
Zero-day attacks involve vulnerabilities with no fix. They lurk in the shadows without your knowledge, getting up to no good. This doesn't bode well for your endpoint security. With zero-day threats hidden in plain sight, most MDR solutions simply aren't up to the task. You need something different. Turn on the lights with CIS MDR. Available exclusively to paid members of the MSI SAC, CIS's MDR delivers more than alerts. Delivers action by transforming raw telemetry into clear prescriptive steps. CIS does this using behavioral analysis, helping you stay protected against zero-day attacks and other threats you don't know about beforehand. Especially coupled with the 24/7/365 CIS SOC as your full-time cyber defense partner. And let's not forget CIS MDR's hosting options in the GovCloud and commercial cloud, supporting your compliance needs. Fully managed and monitored flexible hosting, CIS MDR's got your back. So get started today by visiting cisecurity.org.
And, I do see sometimes people almost getting into a state of despair about all the different issues we've talked about. There's the security, the safety, job concerns you mentioned briefly, Rob. And I caution people against that too. These are incredible times we live in. They're very exciting. Yes, they're fraught with potential problems. They're fraught with real problems. But my goodness, what a fascinating time to be alive and to be working and sharing ideas. I say often, I remember the stuff that I used to talk about 2 weeks ago. It bores me now because so much has happened in the last 2 weeks. I only want to talk about what I'm thinking about now. And 2 weeks from now, it'll probably happen the same way again. How do you keep up with all this stuff, Rob? This stuff is just moving so fast.
There's a gut reaction answer, and it also creates its own emotional response. So I'll go ahead and say it because it's always fun to say it. Removing cybersecurity and just like general AI knowledge, I actually get a lot from TikTok. Instagram is getting better, but the reason TikTok is there's an entire community out there. And if you look at my algorithm, it is, some of it's funny stuff, but as I'm swiping up, it is consistent discussions on latest news, implementations, people using OpenClaw, and I'll see someone do something interesting. And I'm like, can I go replicate that? that's from a technical standpoint. But from a news standpoint, I have like multiple podcasts that I listen to, like when I'm out on walks. In some cases, just the news rundown is like 15 minutes, but it's, the AI Daily Brief is one. Um, and you listen to it every single day. And sometimes they go really, let's talk about the debate around something. Then it goes into a latest report that's released. Obviously they talked about Hugging Face and OpenAI, but it's like, you need to step out of cybersecurity and go into, let's just, focus on what's going on around the world with AI. But when I initially tell people, it's like, how do you keep track? I'm like, honestly, it's, like where everyone else is watching social media. It's, TikTok. And it's, scanning through. And sometimes you fall in that rabbit hole of like, oh, wow, an hour has gone by. But I'm like, oh, I actually had an hour of learning on AI because I'm like, I bookmark things and I actually, let's go, go and test this. Go build the thing that they said they could be built. And it has nothing to do about cybersecurity. But Ed, I think we've chatted about this before. I'm a true believer. In order to defend a thing, you need to go build the thing that you're trying to defend. SendMail, the best way to defend SendMail is to go build a mail server and actually have it function and, run your email. And then you'll start to see, okay, all the different configuration things that you actually had to put in place, but not enough people in cybersecurity are doing that. How many people in cloud security actually built a cloud cluster that they managed? This is, again, something I say, the rudimentary skills in some cases, you're asked to defend a thing you actually never built. But in order to do AI cybersecurity correctly, you need to go build as much as you're trying to figure out how to break in.
Oh, yeah.
I think we talked about this. I know at some point we did.
And I think it's vital. Yep.
Well, definitely heard that. And it's, I think that's part of the skill set too, Ed, because the velocity of this information, I was dealing with understanding vulnerability and attack method, and now we've added all of this extra. It's a bombardment of, you've got to be, I think, again, a new skill when we're looking at security and AI security. And the delineation is very important. I don't think that is, Rob, being seen in the industry. It's just combined, we'll throw it all together. And they are certainly different skill sets as we really start to go down different paths of how they're then applied in different subject areas and matters. Because when we, I'll go down the path of conference, right? What's the topics in the conference of any cybersecurity conference? AI has to be mentioned in every third sentence. I think it's contractually required. And we go down these paths of now trying to combine and integrate these elements. And I think the distinguishing piece is very important. And I think as well, building in this space is as important as well to, I think, appreciate what we're trying to defend and also build protections around is lessons well learned. But I don't know that we're learning some of them fast enough, or we've appreciated the need to go down a path of learning. I think there's a lot of abstraction in the space of, well, it's somebody else's responsibility, and AI is within the organization. Well, so is cybersecurity. Trying to bring those together has been quite difficult. And Rob, one of the things I put forward is the responsibility of AI governance. So when we start to see these types of subject materials, how are we protecting ourselves, or what we're building internally, how would we protect before there's a rogue escape or some creative element that allows access that should, we didn't predict that was going to happen. Very important and impressive in terms of the way I've seen the community respond. But I've also seen, and I'm going to use this term, is some of the AI slop in terms of people wanting to get involved in the conversation without necessarily understanding the context or the, to your point, of actually building and appreciating the technology. I started to see a lot of that as well. And that's what I'm trying to, when I'm reading through and trying to, become more learned in the space, is, where's the facts from some of these fictional elements that are being produced. I find that incredibly difficult. And I'm trying to build my sieve, as it were, to find the good channels. And, some of your recommendations for the podcasts and things of that nature is very important. But I find that there's a lot out there that either doesn't represent fact or is just put forward as someone trying to be a thought leader when it's not really leading, it's more following. But anyway, those are my issues.
Hey, Ed, I'm going to throw the Uno Reverso card at you. And I want to know how you learn.
So,
Yep. Perfect.
Well, I try to attend lots of talks. You and I were both at Unprompted earlier this year, going to those talks, SANS summits. I'm sorry, I don't want to just promote SANS here, but the summits are great. And many of our big summits, if you attend remotely, they're free. So I try to attend a bunch of those talks. I read SANS News Bites faithfully. I've really upped my reading and responding to News Bites massively over the last 2 months. I get a lot from X or Twitter, if you prefer. Follow some really brilliant people there, like Daniel Miessler, Jason Haddix, a lot of other folks that comment a lot on AI. Another thing I just started experimenting with last week is I went to a conference called Fiserv, which is a financial services organization. They had a conference for about 4,500 people. And I sat there and I went through the keynotes and I did something I've not done before, but it was actually quite interesting and useful. I had an AI prompt up with me, and as the presenter was presenting, I was typing in some questions like, hey, I just heard this idea. Where do you think that's headed? Or can you give me a timeline about how that might happen? Now, you have to be careful, because what you can do is if you do that, you have your little AI chat buddy that you're kind of interacting with while a talk is going on. You could get so diverted away from the talk that you're focused on what the AI is saying and not what the actual speaker's saying. I tried very hard to balance the two. It's almost like, Rob, if you and I were sitting next to each other at Impromptu and I whisper something in your ear and you kind of whisper it back to me. I was having that discussion in real time and I found I got so much more out of it, and it gave me ideas for questions to ask of the speaker. And at the end, I came up with a better understanding. Again, you got to be very self-disciplined to do that. And I was just skimming what the AI was giving back to me. Kind of like, Rob, if you whisper in my ear in the middle of a talk, I'm kind of halfway listening to what you're saying, but I'm still listening to the talk, right? So I'm trying to experiment with new ways. And, there's a guy on my team, his name is Chris Davis. And for any time he's dealing with AI and there's like a deluge of information, more than you can even process, like when he's doing a pen test or something, he says all the time, AI, you got me into this problem. Darn it, you're going to get me out of this problem. So I find that a lot of the AI-induced problems, the solution, or at least a way to handle it, is to cleverly leverage AI in response. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I mean, I have a deluge of information, but I'm leveraging AI to try to help understand and process it all. And so far, so good. And I'm learning more than I have, faster than I have. I really do feel invigorated in a way that I haven't in this field in decades. And I think you feel that way too, Rob. And maybe you do too, Sean. You and I haven't talked about it, but I've seen Rob, and I think it's true based on what I've seen in Rob's own career.
To answer your question, I was actually just having a conversation about this today about, someone asked, when are you retiring? I said, first of all, it's much easier to say retiring when you have a partner that also wants to retire and you want to do a bunch of things. I'm like, well, I'm in a situation where I'm running around the planet, solo most of the time, but I'm also staring at, we're in the biggest technological revolution, cultural change thing ever. And I want to be in the middle of that fight.
Yep. I agree.
And I said, when am I going to retire? I don't know. This could be really cool, or I could burn myself out in 5 years for all I know, but again, if it's doing something that you love, is it really work? And Ed, I've always admired you on that, because I don't think you've ever woken up in a single morning of your life and said, wow, I'm going to work, versus I'm about to go have some fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Rob, take care of yourself, man, because we need you more than 5 years. When I was at DEF CON.
I meant 5 years of working, but yeah.
No, I know. I'm not talking like life or death here. I'm talking if you burn out in 5 years, you're still not available for us to work with. So we need that. I was at DEF CON recently, and it was my 30th DEF CON. So 30 years at DEF CON. And somebody said to me, I won't name who it was, but they came up to me and said, oh, so you probably got another 2 or 3 in you? I'm like, dude, I got 20 of these in me. I mean, as long as your health holds up, right? The only thing that could change that, 2 things. One is health. The other is potentially grandchildren, which I don't have yet, but someday. And even then, I'll bring the grandchildren to DEF CON. So problem solved. Yeah, I could see me doing this 20 more years. Sean, you're such a young man. You got plenty of time left, right?
Yeah, I hope so. As long as the industry wants me, I'm here. I love it.
The industry wants you, buddy. The industry wants you.
Yeah, it's Again, I think these are, and just leaning into Rob's point, it's amazing times. Some elements of, where do we fit into these new paradigms and how can we help and assist and build capability? And I've been in a few conferences where Rob has been talking, and you're setting the path for us all. And I really appreciate it. It's absolutely phenomenal work. And one of the really things I do appreciate, this is a thought, is the way you phrase and ask the question really gets people thinking, because it's not just here's the answer. It's an approach to get everybody thinking and contributing to the problem itself. That's an amazing skill and really needed right now.
I definitely get a lot of people contributing to the problem, so I appreciate you saying that.
Well said.
I'm making fun. You just said that. I'm just like, yes, for a lot of people who know me, that is exactly what I do.
Yeah. And a lot of experts are afraid to say, I don't know, or this is still being worked, or something like that. The true experts, though, the ones that really know what's going on, are happy to say it because it invites more conversation, more discussion, and it helps us solve problems. And Rob, you are really great at that. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, they could go around and nod to all of us in here, and all of a sudden becomes really weird quick.
It's been weird quick since we started. Yeah.
Every time I hear something like that, I always go back to, are you guys like Firefly fans? If you remember the TV
I watched
show.
a couple episodes. That's it.
Okay,
Yeah, you can judge me. Go ahead.
I will totally judge you now. That this is, for someone who's like into really cool sci-fi and that kind of thing. So there's a key saying in that, which is we aim to misbehave. So it's an interesting way to think about like the hacker culture, not intentionally trying to break the law, but it's like, I think the word misbehave.
There you go. I like that. And I noticed your shirt that you wore for this episode today. So very
that's
DEF CON.
Random, by the way. I just like my
really?
DEF CON shirts and I wear them out. It's
nice.
like I almost need to buy two, just so I keep one for legacy.
There you go.
All right. Gentlemen, we are at the end of the episode. We've only touched, again, a very small part of the surface. There's a lot in the space to continue to discuss. And again, Rob, anytime you're available, we'd love to have you back to continue down this path. It's so interesting, evolving constantly. And so I don't think we're going to be short for opportunities to discuss elements and perspectives in this space. So I just want to thank you for your thoughts and leadership in the space.
No, I appreciate it. I'm saying when you said that, I'm like, what are you guys doing tomorrow?
Let's do it.
Cool. Oh, well, there's like, I knew it. So I knew it. Yeah. We're all going to go to Ed's tomorrow. Like I'm
come on. We'd love to have you. We'd love
driving
to have
up. We're going to hang out, do this live.
Nice.
And Ed, thank you as always. Really appreciate it. And another great session, great episode.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, guys.
Good seeing you.
Absolutely. And thank you to our audience. Make sure to subscribe in all the usual ways through your preferred podcast provider. Catch us on YouTube at the CI Security. You have a question, comment, concern, reach out to us, podcast@cisecurity.org. And with that, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the show today.
The thoughts and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are solely theirs and do not necessarily reflect those of CIS.
Join us on Wednesdays as we discuss trends and threats, explore security best practices, and interview experts in the industry.
In the meantime, visit our website at cisecurity.org.
And drop us a line at podcast@cisecurity.org.
Together, we'll continue our efforts of creating confidence in the connected world.